Yeah, I think there's like different ways to view it. You could view it from the shamanic lens, where it might feel a little bit more animistic, interacting with a spirit entity. Sometimes people can talk about when they take ayahuasca, for example, maybe they interact with the spirit of ayahuasca, and you might be journeying into these shamanic animistic realms. From the perspective that I take, I kind of embody that shamanic worldview, but I come back to the Western roots with some of Stan Grof's work, and this is something that my teacher Lenny Gibson has really kind of taught us as well, stemming from Stan's work. But Stan classifies psychedelics as non-specific amplifiers of psychic or mental processes. And I think that's a really interesting definition there. And our teacher Lenny really talks about this amplification of psyche, of the mental process of what's going on inside. So when I really think about the psychedelic experience, I think about it amplifying our internal state. It amplifies our experience. And so when I think about that near-death experience with the psilocybin, that's not going to be typical for everybody, right? I think there is something highly charged within my system that I was doing very deep processing, and that experience amplified that internal state to kind of help me process that. So that's the way I view psychedelics, as an amplification of your experience. Yeah, it's a great question. So I guess I'll just give an overview of my first experience with holotropic breathwork. So when I went down to the workshop, as I said, I was pretty skeptical. People were talking about how psychedelic it was, and I was thinking, I don't really believe this. So holotropic breathwork, and so I guess I should also clarify that my training is in Dream Shadow Transpersonal Breathwork. So that's stemmed by Lenny and Elizabeth Gibson at Dream Shadow Group. And that's in the lineage of Stan's work. So when they're holotropic breathwork facilitators, and they facilitate holotropic breathwork, but they train their group in transpersonal breathwork. And so that's the lineage I come from. So the 5 components. So when the way that it's set up, it's usually done in a group format. It could be done in a very long day, but typically they run workshops over the weekend. And there's 5 core components there. There's intensified breathing, evocative music, focused body work, group process, and expressive drawing. So we all gather at their house, or wherever the workshop is taking place, and we come together in a group. And so when you start to engage in the breath work, you would pair up with somebody. And so we do this breather sitter pair. One person breathes and then another person sits with you. So, say if you had 20 people attending a retreat or a workshop, you'd have 10 people breathing and then 10 people sitting. And the sitter's job is really just to be a presence for the person breathing, help them go to the bathroom if they need to get up and go to the bathroom, give them tissues, and just be any sort of support, while the facilitators are also kind of overlooking everything. So intensify breathing, that just means we give pretty minimal instruction. Some people get really caught up on, is there a certain way to breathe? We just say to amplify and intensify your breath. So deep into the belly with minimal pause in the inhale and exhale. So it could look like and, you could breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, in through your mouth, out through your mouth. Really no special instruction, just to really intensify the breathing process. And the workshops go on, or the breathing session goes on anywhere from 2.5 to 3 hours. So we usually make a music playlist for about 3 hours, and people are breathing. They're not breathing that intensely the whole time. There's some people that do, but, it's pretty exhausting work. my analogy is more kind of like a bird. You do this heavy flapping with the wings, and then you can get up there. You're in this liminal space. And then if you want to intensify the experience, you can deepen your breath. But the breath is a vehicle that gets you into this, what Stan would call a holotropic state of consciousness. And yeah, the breath is just, you can amplify it, you can decrease your experience. And so yeah, we're in this group. We're doing intensified breathing, and then there's loud music playing. And music really kind of helps to keep the experience internalized a little bit. Kind of creates that like space for you to do your own exploration. And then also people can be very cathartic. There's a lot of physical and emotional catharsis that's happening. So people might be screaming, crying, and the music helps to absorb some of other people's experiences. And the music kind of has an arc. It starts off very rhythmic, getting the breathers to breathe in their body, and then it comes up and then comes back down. So the peak of it can be very emotional. It's like kind of liminal music, bringing out different emotions. I like to think of the arc as the hero's journey, getting ready for the journey, getting into battle, and then you face your crisis, and then the homecoming and return. And so what can really come out of these experiences? My teacher, Lenny, we don't really distinct too much between the psychedelic experience and the breathwork experience, but saying that these are all tools and vehicles for inner exploration. And what we're doing is kind of bringing psyche to the forefront, and that gets amplified. So it's this like intensification of your own inner experience. And I was pretty skeptical of that, hearing like, how could breathing really induce these states? So my first experience with it, I ended up going on the second day. So I went down with my roommate in college, and I'm sitting in this room, just watching people breathe, and I'm seeing people have huge catharsis happening, crying, screaming, they're shaking, and they're really, getting things out. And my immediate thought was, what the hell did I sign up for? It looked really, really bizarre. And so when I got into it on the second day, my immediate experience, I started to breathe, and I felt this just this overwhelming sense of like oceanic bliss. I felt like I was in the womb of my mother, and it just felt so meditative, and I could see myself like in the womb. And all of a sudden that started to come to an end, and I felt like all of a sudden I started choking, and I shot up from the mat, and I remember grabbing my neck, coughing, and I couldn't breathe. It felt like something was constricting me. It felt like I had something wrapped around me. And so this is a very somatic process that's happening. And it felt like I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. And then I went through a process of, again, reliving my near-death experience, reliving that psilocybin experience again. And I was really blown away by the intensity of the experience, going, wow, that was probably the most intense experience I had. It was like I relived my birth process, I relived this near-death experience, I relived this psychedelic experience, which such body intensity. And that's what really kind of drew me into it, that like I started to process information a little bit differently than some of my earlier psychedelic work. And the interesting thing was, I went back to my mother and told her about that experience. And she said, that's really weird, because you almost died coming out. You had the umbilical cord wrapped all around you. You're blue in the face. And my dad told me that, we thought you might have had some sort of like, brain damage from that. And so just really interesting that these experiences can come up, and, I think it's very easy to dismiss it, but it's interesting when you start to maybe go into parts of your history and view it. There was another woman in a workshop that said she could smell ether on her breath, and ended up finding out that her mother was triple dosed with ether during her labor. And this person was much older when they used ether during labor. So, that turned my skepticism into curiosity. I said, wow, what is really kind of going on here? How can intensified breathing bring up such deep, profound states of consciousness? And I think this is interesting with the lineage of holotropic breathwork, is that Stan's work with LSD. I mean, he kind of created this cartography of the psyche. When we think about like traditional psychology, we think more biographical material, like working with your past. But then Stan adds this layer of the transpersonal. So, reliving, past life experiences, connecting to the universe, maybe reliving an experience of an animal. And then the transpersonal can vary and be very, very wide in experience. And then the perinatal. So he talks about the significant role that our birth process plays a role in our development and personality. And just really interesting that this stuff can come up in both psychedelic experiences and breathwork experiences. And so when Stan was at Esalen in Big Sur, California, he was a scholar in residence working through some of his clinical notes from his early LSD experiences. And the owners there and founders said, hey, maybe you could do a workshop. So he co-created this breathing technique with his wife, Christina. And what he found was that people were having these experiences similar to psychedelic experiences. And so he was able to take some of his clinical notes and kind of compare it to what was going on in the breathwork experience. And I remember my teacher, Lenny, was just sharing a story about how he got really interested in breath work, where he had this experience very similar to an LSD experience. And he told Stan that, and Stan just looked at him and said, that's what turned me on to this as well, is that just the power of intensifying your breathing can produce a holotropic state of consciousness.
Yeah.